Hey everyone! So, for my Ethics in the Real World project, I had the privilege of observing and serving at this nonprofit called Open Door Mission here in Houston, Texas. And I actually have some notes so that I can get this in 5 minutes. So I'll read those out in a second. But just a little bit of background. I work for Memorial Drive Presbyterian Church in Houston, and I'm a youth minister. So for this project, I actually got the privilege to take some students for a service day, and it doubled as my observation, which was really great. And it was neat to get to see the students have some interaction that I was experiencing as well. So Open Door Mission is an independent faith-based nonprofit, and they're an evidence-based recovery and rehabilitation facility dedicated to transforming the lives of the most severely addicted, destitute, homeless, and disabled men. But there's about 5 different phases of moving on to complete independent living. There's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and then the last phase is the Mayfield House transitional living. And so I won't go into detail about all the 4 phases, but the Mayfield phase, the 5th phase, is like a transitional living phase. And that is where we got to serve. So it was with men who were in this transition place where they're still living at Open Door, and they're still pretty much dependent upon Open Door for their resources, but they're working towards independent living. And so what we got to do was go in and we cooked a meal for them and served it. And then after we served it, we got to sit around tables with the men and just talk to them and hear their stories. And it was a really great experience. It was really rewarding for me personally, and it was also really rewarding for me as a youth minister. So as far as employing the different moral agencies that we have been talking about in Kingdom Ethics, there were a couple at play here. One that stood out for sure were the basic convictions agency and the mission of the church, and just that this is a faith-based organization and that they are actually in the community doing something because we're called to, as the church, to love our neighbor, whoever our neighbor is. And so that was one. And then forgiveness and discipleship. I really love how this mission works, how they bring in men, they address the sin, they address the addiction, they address these things, but there's so much forgiveness and helping them understand Jesus' grace and that Jesus responds to us when we repent is huge. And then just making sure that these men are discipled and are mentored is huge as well. And so that was one thing I saw at play. Another thing I saw at play was the way of seeing, and just the idea of social change, that these men are people. One of the things I learned was that so many of these men didn't choose to get into drugs just because they were like, oh, this is cool. A lot of them had drug addiction in their homes. A lot of them were forced into drug addiction by abusive parents. And it's a lot of it was just pure coping and being able to function. And so I was kind of blown away by that. But that was something that I was like, yes, this makes sense. And then just the truthfulness and openness of just how that works, that kind of plays into that. Just how drug addiction isn't as simple as sometimes we think it is. Homelessness is not as simple as sometimes we think it is. And then just to conclude, I was really got to experience this feedback loop that they talk about on page 185 and 186, and then 3 kind of concepts of the feedback loop that I got to see working in real time, which is, befriending others, just sitting down at a table and talking to these men about their stories changes your ethics. It changes your perceptions. It changes your ideas about the things that are at play here, homelessness. And then honest community, it was really neat to be with my students and kind of debrief this after we were done. It was really neat, just how sometimes opinions change in community. And that's even talked about in Kingdom Ethics. It's how people are more likely to change their morals and their ethics alongside other people and experiencing it. It's really neat. And then the transformative practices. This was a transformative practice. It was really neat to just be reminded of how we need to be doing this as Christians. We need to be involved. We can't just sit in our bubbles in our churches. We have to go out and experience real life in the real world, and let that help in shaping our ethics, not just reading it from a book. And so that was something that I really took away from this project, and I had a great time.